Excellent.
Okay.
You ready?
No, what?
And 3, and 2. Welcome to the Iterative Approach podcast, where we talk about everything Agile, development, and mindset. With me tonight is Nicola, probably one of South Africa's best BAs, if I'm not mistaken. So, talking about a little bit of BA, business analysis, and business analyst tonight. So I'm just going to read like a little statement. So broadly speaking, business analyst enables the transformation of organizational structures by identifying business requirements and recommending solutions to add value for stakeholders. Wow, a lot of pressure, a lot of value. And with that said, Nicola, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Hi, my name is Nicola Myers. I am a senior business analyst at Agile Bridge. We have amazing projects we're running at the moment, and I love being a specialist. What I find, work experience-wise, I've almost 14 years, makes me sound so old, but anyway, 14 years of experience.
It's okay, you look like 20. It's fine.
Oh, so sweet. And I have several qualifications under my name. I did 7 years of IT consulting, and then I worked with a training company with my own business for a while, and I got several more qualifications. So UNISA, Honours in IT, I have the IREB syllabus, German syllabus, the IIBA, the Scrum Master, Product Owner, Strategy, quite a few actually.
Okay.
I like collecting acronyms after my name.
Okay.
So
Quick question on that. You mentioned something about training.
Yes.
Is that like training transformation, or is it actually assisting a business in how to be more, I don't know, business analysis friendly?
So what not many people know is there's actually two main paths to business analysis. The one is the IT development side,
Okay.
and the other one's the process and management side.
What's the difference, quickly?
Because you want to, for example, you want to improve your leave system, or at a higher level would be how to improve your strategic initiatives and the steps you would go through to get it signed off and things like that.
So the second part is more transformation, and then the first part is more specifically to either a problem or a current or existing solution that they have. Right?
Exactly, yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So kicking off the questions for tonight. As I've bragged a couple of times now, so this is episode 5, and I've mentioned 5 times that I have a Scrum Master's certification. So just to add on to that, but something that I noticed, and also one of the main reasons why I have you here tonight, is within Scrum and the process as a whole, there's no clear definition of a defined role for a business analyst or a business analyst. Why do you think that is?
So the journey's taken me a long time to figure that question out. I've been thinking about it for about 2 years or so.
Cool.
And through my qualifications and experience, especially with a strong Agile team, I realized that the theoretical side says there's no role as a BA. There's only Scrum Master, Product Owner, and team. Okay. So the team needs to have all the skills within it. So in other words, each member, yes, they may specialize in something, but they need to have other skills. So a developer should be a tester as well as perhaps a planner.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. So within the team, you see a business analysis as a part of the actual team itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the theoretical idea. And in theory, what recruiters should be looking for is a business analyst who is a Scrum team member, or a Scrum team member with specialist in business analysis. But this doesn't help. I mean, definitely does not happen.
Yeah.
So it does get confusing when you start being hired as a business analyst for an Agile environment. But in the end, the team has to work in Agile as a full team. They're self-managed, and that's when they become incredibly powerful.
Okay. Do you think the exclusion or the physical exclusion within the Scrum process and your Scrum certification, where they don't mention a business analyst, do you think because it's stemmed from, or Scrum is kind of stemmed from waterfall and improving that process. Do you think that a business analyst is very waterfall based, or that might be the reason for leaving them out in in the Scrum process or Agile process?
Yeah. So it's a good point. So there is specific emphasis on a BA when you do waterfall versus Agile. So waterfall, there's a lot of your analysis and a bit of your planning, and it's sort of the first part, which is fine. We do testers a little bit at the end. But with Agile, we also do a lot of solution validation, and that is one of the Babak areas of knowledge, and it really isn't done very often. We also do requirements maintenance as well. And as a waterfall BA, you basically hand over your document, and then that's to the dev team, and you don't really see it ever after that. Whereas Agile, you're in validating that system solution as you go along every day. So there is different emphasis on the different knowledge areas.
What challenges do a BA face within this Scrum process or Scrum team?
So it's difficult when the Scrum team isn't working as a team, and then suddenly your stand-ups basically become micromanagement. And you can't fail, which is very, very difficult. And so, you have useless stand-ups, but also you can't speak to the actual stakeholders because you're going through a product owner, and that product owner is supposed to be your gateway to the company. And sometimes they are not available for weeks. And in theory, they're supposed to be in the stand-ups every single day.
How do you overcome that? Wouldn't and correct me if I'm wrong, and you can swear at me, but wouldn't a good business analysis kind of do the question asking before a sprint starts, and just be a kind of a backup in the stand-ups?
So that's also an interesting point when it comes to being Agile, is that we need to be ahead of that sprint. In fact, the UX person needs to be ahead of that sprint, and we've got to be ahead of them.
Sorry, UX person? That's
user experience, interface design, user journeys, etc.
Right, the one that draws the pretty pictures.
Yes, and makes it usable. Minor detail.
Okay.
So and that actually brings me to one point that I also learned that was really interesting, is that you have a start of a project and you kick off, but what are the developers supposed to do in that first sprint? While you're doing your analysis, and it's researching and making sure your environments are good and everything, so that you have that analysis time. That was one of the big things that I always got confused with, because business analysts are supposed to start before that start. That's very confusing.
So in the Scrum process, we kind of call that sprint zero, where an analysis and everything happens, and then the developers get a chance to kind of get together, get the environments up and running, making sure that the tech stack and everything is agreed upon before everything starts. How can a business analyst become a better Scrum team player?
So one of the things about a business analyst is that they are ambassadors of users' needs. So they're kind of, if they're trying to always push the user needs, they're kind of a little bit against like the project manager, because he wants a certain deadline, or the tester is like, they're not able to test that particular way of doing it, etc. So it's to kind of not push against the other people in your team. And also, because it's Agile, we want to believe that everyone is doing their best.
So that's within the analysis process, do you guys include SMEs or subject matter experts, like a technical lead or a very senior developer, getting the requirements from the client and actually kind of guiding, is this possible or not?
So what I found very effective recently is that if we have a product delivery phase, I take leadership on stakeholders and workshops and everything, but I do have a UX, UI developer, a product designer, and an architect.
That other person.
The other person. And an architect, and I reference them because there's no point in saying, oh, we can build this for the customer, and then, the architect's like, well, actually, that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
So I call on them.
And that's one of the things I don't understand is because of just that value alone, where we can actually safeguard the client from themselves in saying, yes, they want to do this, but technically we need to go in another direction, then the business analyst would steer the client or the stakeholders in a direction. So it always baffles my mind when you try to develop something but there's no business analysis or even a person doing some analysis present. So what's the success rate of I don't know if you know this, but do you know the success rate of a project being assisted by a BA and without?
So
0 to 100.
If you make a mistake or you don't define a requirement properly, there have been studies to say that it's 5 times more expensive if you catch it in testing, and 10 times more expensive if you do it in maintenance.
Okay.
So
maintenance is now after deployment and production.
But you can imagine, like, if you change one requirement, it has a cascading effect on all the other deliverables.
Correct.
The testing, the coding, the planning, the user guides, the test cases, everything. One little change here. So it's very expensive.
And that's actually very interesting that you mentioned that. Agile Bridges technical or CTO, he always uses that to say fail early or fail quick.
Exactly.
Because it's a lot less money or effort and time spent into things.
So technically we don't make things like the developers, but we save the project a lot of money.
Yeah, of course. So. How do you get a client to see that value, by the way? Before even you show documentation or the process and everything, how would you guys enable companies to sell BAs?
So it's all about understanding the value. We really want to support the users and we really want to get value out of the solution. So if we're always pushing for value, some other people in the team are going to be holding us back, restricting us technically, but we're
Is that a reference to me or no? I'm not holding you back, right?
No, nice try, project manager.
Okay.
And I've totally forgotten my train of thought.
That's amazing.
That's great. That's great. What about project managers?
No, it's just but something very important, and I think being able to have a business analyst within a project is really important, and I think it like you also state, it boosts the success rate of a project.
So we just focus on value and we push for value, and we are on the client side. So we try and get all their dreams, let their dreams come true.
Okay. So talking about dreams come true, and seeing your vastly qualified self, what qualifications should a business analyst obtain in Agile and even in general? Not all companies are Agile yet. Some companies still need the kind of waterfall method or methodology. So what's the qualifications? What's your go-to?
So on the Agile side, we have Scrum.org, and they're as big as Scrum Alliance. Scrum.org, the exam's 2,000-3,000 Rand, and it's an exam. Scrum Alliance is a 2-day course, which is 16,000 Rand. And they're very much, you've got to do Agile to be Agile. And that's an expensive 2-day course.
Well,
and you don't have...
I'm not going to brag, I'm Scrum Alliance, and I would vote for that. That 2 days physical with other like-minded people going through that exercise is really valuable.
Really? Okay. Those are the 2 international scrums. And then we've got our local one, Think Agile, which is 12 to 16,000. And then we have, quite popular in South Africa as well, is Agile 42.
Yeah.
But they're all over the world. They have several
Correct.
branches.
Okay.
As far as non-agile work BA goes, the IIBA, you have entry level, and I'm sure you've heard of CBAP.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a CBAP on your CV, it gets you to the top of the pile. If not, the first person to interview. It's huge in South Africa.
The cost on that?
So that is incredibly hard to get into.
Oh.
The entry level one requires no experience. The highest one is professional, requires 5 years of provable experience.
Okay.
Then you have a apply with an application, which is like 3,000. Then you become a member, then you can write. So the whole process is about 16, 17,000. And it's hard to write that exam. So you have to recertify every 2 years, and you have to prove professional hours as well. So it is
very similar to Scrum and the Scrum certification. It's also every 2 years, and you have to do your CMI or CUI points and stuff.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. There are other two local organizations that are the broad BAs. So there's Viewpoint Training and FTI. FTI is hugely popular because they have been through the large organizations. They have a 6-month course program, which is 36,000. Viewpoint has some great courses preparing for the German syllabus, which is the IREB syllabus. I'm a huge fan of theirs. They actually taught me a lot of things like negotiation skills and how to choose a tool and all of that kind of thing, which isn't taught in other things. IIBA, unfortunately, is a very philosophical book, and it is boring.
Okay.
Yeah, and then don't underestimate Udemy. Yes, you cannot put that on your CV, but...
I did. All my Udemy courses. I love Udemy.
But if you get the special, always get the special. It's about 150 Rand or 200 Rand.
$200 now.
And if it doesn't work out, if you don't like the guy, then you don't like the guy. And I use that for my prep courses. And
it's a good refresher as well. Yeah. If some new course comes out and it's within your field, I do the same with project management, product ownership, and then Scrum as always.
Yeah. Like lectures, press play is awesome.
Yeah.
Like, you know, how you don't have to read anything. Why would you read anything?
Who reads? It's podcasts. Right? Come on, you listen to everything. Cool. So, as you mentioned now, with the qualifications, you mentioned the Scrum and Scrum Org and Scrum Alliance, but that's mainly for product owners and Scrum Masters. So, are you kind of saying that a BA would benefit from doing what a Scrum Master does?
Yeah, definitely. The Agile is a framework.
Yeah.
So you can change it how you want. Technically, if you make quick decisions and you want to use survey techniques and it works, then that's Agile. So it's pivotal. So as a business analyst, we can absorb some of that information and then help our team. Because in the end, we're supposed to be helping our developers and our architects and everybody on the team. So
it almost sounds like that kind of what they teach in Scrum is the servant leadership, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So out of those that you mentioned now, you said the IIBA is the so for someone starting off just out of school or something like that, what is your, let's say, ABC to get into IT business analysis?
Then I would go with ECBA because it's so well recognized throughout the world.
Okay.
And that's cheaper than the CBAP. And then I would go with Agile from Scrum.org or Scrum Alliance. Okay. Because I know that managers push Agile. They don't really know what it is.
Yeah.
But
I know.
Everyone's supposed to be doing Agile. So if you kind of don't know what like the different ceremonies are, then I think you're going to have struggle. And then, of course, you have acceptance criteria, and if you don't know how to write those or what they are, then I think you would be at a disadvantage.
Or the expectation of it, right? Because as a business analyst, you would write your requirements, but you wouldn't think of either the negative cases, the client's acceptance criteria, or even the I think you guys called it definition of done or definition of ready, right?
As well as the different scenarios. So if you have a manager log in or a support person log in, or people from different countries log in, that scenario is going to be different.
Okay. So Agile is pretty much a good base to have for any and all Agile business analysts. Keep screwing that up. I don't know why. So with the training and the qualifications, right? What are the tools you use to generate value outputs and ensuring greater project success? What kind of tools do you use? I know for project management, we use Gantt charts and Microsoft Planner, or we do even Excel, email, anything that gets a report to a client or to finance or to Exco, is good to go. So do you have like a set of tools that is like fundamental to being a business analyst?
Yeah, so it's a good question, especially for business analysis, is basically we get dumped with Microsoft Excel, Word, and maybe Visio. Some people get that. Which you don't, those are the ones you can get past procurement department.
Okay.
Trying to get a specialist business analysis tool past procurement department is very, very difficult.
What do you mean procurement department? Like just the guys that actually wants to
buy licenses.
Buy the licensing.
If you literally go to a manager and say, I need a license for a wireframing tool for low fidelity wireframes, they're going to be like, you're going to use it twice and nobody else is going to use it. And you're like, that's the point. Except we'd use it a lot. So we kind of don't have that much flexibility. However, there are different tools out there that are useful. So one of my favorites is Balsamic with a Q. It's a low fidelity wireframing tool. That's all it does. And
relax, the mic hasn't done anything to you.
It hasn't moved yet. So it's great for wireframing. Another important part is when you choose a tool, figure out what its main focus is.
Okay.
So, for example, DevOps is development operations type thing. It has add-ons, so you might get some good business analysis value out of it. Yeah. But I like to choose software that's specifically for that.
And how would you use DevOps within or assisting the team in DevOps?
Yeah. So there we can decide, we can help them estimate some of the tickets from previous experience, looking at those requirements, seeing how big those requirements are. Yeah. We can also trim the product backlog, but we do run into an interesting thing that I feel very strongly about in Agile is that business analysts shouldn't be making decisions. And that's why they shouldn't be product owners. And I've seen this in several circumstances. So let's say we are redoing, it's a silly case, but let's say we're redoing your processes. Okay, it's a bit different from IT. But let's take the example, we are redoing your processes. And a consultant comes in and says that everybody in the office needs to fill out a 2-page survey at 8 a.m. every single day. You're going to be like, why do I have to do that? I don't want to do that. I don't care about it. I'm going to get irritated about it. Yeah. And the truth is that basically no one had a choice. Yeah. If a consultant comes in and tells you how to run your business, you've got to get the decision makers from business. They've got to buy into it. Gotcha. And then they will filter it through to all the other people. Okay. So the same thing happens with product owners. Is that if business analysts work as product owners and become those decision makers, it doesn't mean that they're going to actually use the software because we're guessing what business wants. Gotcha. Whereas the product owner's main role is to know what business wants.
Exactly. And then also, just thinking from a project management perspective, let's say, for instance, we have a business analyst that runs everything, made the decisions, 6 months down the line, product rolls out and business goes, well, this is not what we wanted. No. And obviously no invoice, no payments, no nothing. So it is quite, like you said, it's quite dangerous for having a business analyst play that role.
So as a business analyst, with our experience, we can make suggestions, but decision making always comes down to, to the
What's
client.
what's your pet peeve with working? Okay, so let me rather not keep it all negative. In your opinion, what's the best PO and what's the worst PO?
The best PO is somebody who is at least 3 stand-ups a week and is very decisive.
Okay.
Because Agile...
Or has the power for authority, right?
Yeah. Because Agile relies on quick changes, those decisions need to be made.
Yeah.
And that's also what managers don't understand, is that if you have 7 sign-offs, your team can be, trained in Agile. It's not going to happen because you need 7 levels of sign-offs. And I have met several companies, including our Reserve Bank, that need 7 levels of sign-offs. So a very decisive client is great. One that comes back to you very, very quickly. Okay. And as you said, the one that has the power to actually make those decisions. Because
then, if they make the decision, it's, for a fact it's not going to get questioned. There's not going to be any surprises when you do a review or when you do a demo or something like that.
Yeah.
Wow. So within DevOps and within the Agile kind of process and methodology, developers make use of user stories, right? So what's the best way to leverage on a user story, or how do you create a user story that's kind of readable to a developer that can actually understand it and execute it?
So it's a good question, and one thing that I also had to learn along my journey was that why do we phrase it as a user story? And the simple thing is, if you phrase it as a requirement, you're not 100% sure what that business value is. And that is what is in every single user story. It's
value.
As a
business
user,
value.
So I want to have the function so that.
Okay.
And so that is the most important, because it shows your value throughout the entire thing.
And it's also, if I'm not mistaken, but a user story is also a piece of work or an item that is physically testable. So it's understood by the business and they can test it. So they know what to expect. And if anything varies, they know it's broken.
Yeah. And because it adds value, it can meet your sprint goal.
Yep.
It can be added into epics and work like that.
Feature first, then epic, but okay. Each to its own. It's fine.
And user stories are great. Also, the other thing which is very important about user stories is that they are not your requirements. They are fundamentally a point of conversation. So it's nice to put up a little user story, post-it note, and then think of all the requirements we need to go with it, perhaps part of the architecture diagram that goes with it, statements, diagrams, anything, to be able to give the developers enough information for them to estimate it.
Yep.
That is theoretically what should happen.
Yep.
In real life, we start getting a bit too much documentation and sign-offs, but in pure Agile, in theory, if they can estimate it, that's all they really need.
Okay. So with that statement that you said now, in having a client sign everything off, let's take for instance, like you mentioned, the Reserve Bank, right? So obviously there is mitigation, there is security risks and all of those kind of things. So obviously they need to sign everything off. Some of the companies that we deal with has got ISO 9000 compliance that they need to keep with. So that means everything is documented from when you stand up to when you go to bed, right? So in your opinion, let's take into consideration that sign-offs are needed. How would you do that kind of process the best way possible?
So that actually goes to the second branch of business analysis that I mentioned earlier, and that's process management. Yeah. So what you would do is you would check the business rules behind every single one of those sign-offs.
Okay.
And then you'll ask, then you can go through a whole process of, is this needed? Why is this needed? Does it add value? And you'll find out that some of those sign-offs are actually not really sign-offs. They just go to the manager and that's it. They always get signed off. It's always approved. And it shows up in our process models. it will say something like get sent to manager for approval. And I'm like, ask them what happens if they, reject it. And they're like, they never reject it.
Wow.
So I'm like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
So you've got the lean thinking to make sure all that waste comes out. You speed up time, you have less defects, higher quality, etc. And there's quite a few nice process management principles that you can go through and double check that those are actually required.
Okay. So even if there are requirements needed, like with a active PO or active stakeholders, you can get that sign off very quickly, very easily, and then still, and like you also mentioned, because you kind of in front of or before the developers actually start developing, you can get that kind of sign offs already done for a period of time, or for, let's say, 40 points, which the velocity showed this team can deliver 40 points in 2 weeks. Then you kind of make sure that everything's signed off for 40 points, and then you just kind of carry on from there.
Yeah, and I think one success factor to a project is coming up with your stakeholder analysis first, or right early in the project, because then you can find out who the actual people are who are signing this off. Sometimes they don't know they're supposed to be signing it off.
Gotcha. So that's the request that you sent to me today, right? Is who signs this off and when?
Who signs off, like who has the final say.
Yeah.
But also what's useful for that is how there's a certain stakeholder speciality. So perhaps we need to ask a compliance person. And then if it's not on the list, you're like, but we need to check that with compliance. We need to find a compliance person.
So you do that kind of analysis first. So if, let's say, for instance, you work with banking or a process or something updates, these people are needed. Otherwise, they're not needed. UX, UI gets signed off by marketing, and then it goes through.
Yeah. So usually what I do is that main person signing off for the project sponsor, I'd ask them, who should I talk to? And then ask those people, who should I talk to? And the list gets pretty long after a while, but at least you know that you've covered everything. I've had issues with projects before where the finance person wasn't involved in the project, and it turned out to be a lot of printing, and he rejected the IT project and said we have to redesign it.
Wow.
So I learned my lesson then.
That was an expensive lesson, I would imagine, right?
Very. We had basically threw 6 months of development down the drain.
Oh, okay. That is very expensive. So with the questions and everything out of the way, I've read and I've actually seen these statements, and we touched on it a little bit, but what's your view on the assumption that people have that a business analyst should fulfill the project or the product owner role?
Yay! Such a lovely debate. Okay, so the one thing I do agree with, the project owner and the BA should both know is as much industry knowledge as possible, so they talk the same language.
Gotcha.
Okay. What a BA will make a successful project with the PO is if we also start training them on how to think like a BA, how to write user stories, the importance of acceptance criteria, the importance of a self-managed team, and perhaps even how to draw process models. They start talking our language, which is really, really nice.
And then how do you kind of train a stakeholder or a product owner? How do you train them to kind of think like you do?
You basically go through the benefits, I find, of an experience of the Agile projects you've been on and how well they work.
Okay.
A lot of people have been burnt before.
Yep.
And you will say to them, what problems did you have before? And we can say, well, we are going to do this to counteract those things. And we sort of get buy-in. But what I've found is if you have a good team, that team soon becomes very meshed together type thing. And that's what's great, what's like beautiful about Agile. If it's done correctly, it is a proper team. And if, for example, one of the bosses starts pointing fingers, that team isn't going to break. They're just going to be like, we were all there. We all did this. Yeah. It's amazing.
And then like one of the items that I'm worried about is for the necessity of a business analyst to become the product owner? Because at the moment, so if I think about this in a business sense, that let's say, for instance, we have a PO that's not there or not regularly available. There's so much pressure from the company side and the client side going, hey, we need a delivery. When are we seeing this? What's happening? So what's the kind of safeguards or advice that you can give to others to kind of guard them from jumping into the PO role because they are kind of forced into it?
Yeah. So it comes up with, I would imagine you would tackle it the same as a difficult stakeholder. What I would do is I would find out a little bit of the politics that's going on in the business, and find out from one of the other people how to maneuver the PO into a more usable place.
Okay.
So perhaps finding out, maybe they're on 2 different projects, and then I can speak to the product owner to say, can you have this guy dedicate a certain amount of time? Yeah. I've done that before at South African Mint. It worked really, really well. There was
you saw an issue, you saw a blocker, got in there, updated their process, and got them to kind of assist. Yeah,
and then once they have also a problem with a lot of POs is they're not dedicated to that project. They have their own work, and then they have the PO as well. Yeah. If we start thinking that 20% of their time is actually dedicated to overseeing this project or working with the team, then it's a lot easier to get them on board.
Cool. And then let's say, for instance, a product owner can only give you 20% in a month. Do you kind of set expectations that delivery is going to be slower, but also get the documentation and all the requirements and everything ready for that 20%? So have a Thursday, and that Thursday everything like it gets thrown and we get the most answers out of that person.
Yeah, exactly. So we would book a 2, maybe 3 hour session workshop, and we would have wireframes prepared already, because at least you have something down. Yeah. And they can rip it to shreds. They're kind of expected to rip it to shreds because you don't know the environment 100%. Yeah. But at least you have something down. And then you can start hashing out the requirements. And by doing wireframes, you've actually jumped quite a bit ahead. And it basically halves the amount of analysis work required.
Would you say business analysis is more picturesque or more written? Typography? Is it more pictures or more kind of statements?
It depends how well you draw the pictures.
Okay. If you have the right tool, right?
Not even. You can use Microsoft Word to do a process diagram, but I've seen some horrific ones, and I'm like, even the 3rd time somebody's gone over them, I'm like, I still don't get this. Okay. So whereas sentences, English is universal, and you can keep your sentences simple. So sometimes it is better to have sentences.
Okay. So you would kind of have it 50-50 split, or which in your kind of professional capacity, where do you get the most feedback?
So one thing from my experience is I can actually choose different techniques for different projects. And I find customizing it is very, very important to get the most value and the most in-depth analysis to your developers.
Wow. So even just the process or the way that you work with the client is Agile and Iterative, because you see, hey, this guy's not working, let's do this one.
Exactly.
Let's draw pretty pictures, or like lawyers would have, or, I don't know, doctors would have words.
Yeah. And then, for one example is perhaps the client uses a certain software, like Lucid Chart is one of the bonding software. You learn Lucid Chart because then you have a collaborative software. Okay. Another thing is, for example, if you're struggling to get people into meetings after 3 p.m., perhaps they have kids and they need to go and pick up their kids. So perhaps you want to start having meetings earlier, like at 7:30, for example. If that's fine with everybody. So you keep iterating and improving it as you go along.
Do you think that process or that kind of preparedness for a client makes sense for, let's say, people in different time zones?
I think so. What I've enjoyed with one of our recent projects is with Australia. Yep. They basically work when we sleep.
Yeah.
So we have an 8 o'clock meeting, and then I do my work. I sort of post it almost like pigeon mail sort of thing. Have the questions, they review it, and the next morning it's in my inbox or looked at and nice.
Awesome.
So
Shout out to Nicola and George.
They're the best stakeholders ever.
They are,
POs,
right?
best POs,
Best POs ever. So, with everything said tonight, what and as a final point, what does a BA document to a developer look like, and is it universally the same, or do you need to train developers on how to read your business analysis documents?
It's a good question. Basically, even if you're in Waterfall, there's no standard template for a BRS or a business feature diagram or a specification, or they're called different names.
Yeah.
The German military has a structured list you work through. But everyone is different. I've done a lot of research on what the perfect spec template is, and you, like I say, you try and get experience, and you try and do it the best for that customer. Perhaps, for example, instead of going on for 2 pages about the objectives of the solution, you just write down 1 sentence of business need, for example. The developers, if the developers already know what the problem they're solving is, then they can understand that. But I'm very visual as well, so I like doing my wireframes, and then I explain the requirements written, and then the Scrum Master can take those and put them onto DevOps, kind of copy paste. And I find that is the most effective and efficient way of doing it.
And then within that process, and then once you've handed that document over to developers, is it just a silent handover, or is it like a grooming session with the developers, taking them through and kind of answering questions that they might have on some of the items?
Yeah, so it's best to do a walkthrough, because sometimes they don't know, sometimes why that requirement exists. So, for example, we've just had a recent example of do you want the app to have a 4-digit or 5-digit PIN? And we didn't realize that their reasoning behind business has a reason behind a 4-digit PIN, and we didn't know that. So unless I explain it to the developers, they're going to be like, no, that's a security risk. I found that very interesting. Also, they're going to be asking me, for example, on Teams, the questions as they come up, and as a business analyst, I need to get back to them as soon as possible. They have massive deadlines, and if they have a massive question, which is a blocker, they kind of may get into trouble the next day because they couldn't do it. So I make a priority to be able to get back to them as soon as possible. And
in the first couple of questions that I asked tonight, you mentioned briefly on testing. Is that the closing the loop of a business analyst when providing a service, is actually testing what they put in?
No.
Wow. So that's just my hope. Okay. My hopes and dreams are done.
The thing about it is that we actually need to still maintain our requirements. And that has come up quite a bit. Is, for example, you design something 6 months ago, perhaps there's a new technology. Those requirements are going to be changed and updated for the new technology. Or perhaps we didn't understand a problem or value 6 months ago we didn't need. We didn't know we needed it. Now we do know we need it. So there's always going to be maintenance on those requirements. And it's an ongoing basis.
Would you say then a QA or automation testing and all of those kind of things are also just as important as a business analyst, like we saw tonight? I can't imagine a project being done without you guys.
Definitely. Like I said, we save a lot of money, and we help the developers, and they do it twice as fast, and it's effective and it's efficient. So I find business analyst is critical to that list.
Not just because you won, right?
No. But we are awesome, though. We're the best. We don't just write documents, I promise. We think through the solution, and we do the analysis for you.
And that's... don't you find it sometimes really difficult to justify the time spent? Or do you kind of convince a client through the work that you do that, at the end of the month, they don't worry about paying because they can actually see the value?
So for me, that's what the entire Scrum team actually does.
Okay.
It's like everybody in there is chasing the value. I also like to think that up on on the boards we have the scope of the project as well, and keeping that in perspective, I think guides your sprint every single time, and it guides your team. And so I think that's also why there's no specific business analyst, because we're all adding value and we're all having a look at and solving the problems together.
That's awesome. Nicola, thank you so much for coming through tonight. I really appreciate it, although you were an hour late. It's absolutely fine.
I had a wardrobe malfunction.
T-shirt and jeans, understandable.
Yeah. Company T-shirt and jeans.
Awesome. But Thank you so much for coming through. It was a real blast having a chat with you.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Peace.
Thank you to our sponsor, Agile Bridge. Their unique blend of experience, accreditation, and in-depth business knowledge drive the crafting of integrated and empowering software solutions to medium and large corporate clients. Find out more by visiting agilebridge.co.za or send an email to info@agilebridge.co.za.